Hello and welcome back. So, we're going to look through the very first hypothesis. And before we jump right into coding, let me provide you with some tips. So, in order to come up with a good hypothesis, you first need to look for references. And the very first tip is to look for good references. So, these references can come from many different sources. First, it can be from domain experts. Projects like these, there should be counterparts who are domain experts. And in our case, it will be the insurance experts and specifically fraud related experts. And since they have a lot of experience, they would know by firsthand experience what kind of features there are when it comes to fraud related features. So we should ask them and do multiple interviews to come up with a lot of insights. And it's very important to extract as much as information as you can from those domain experts so that you can understand them and apply them to the current data set. And you should also actively ask questions like, what are some of the features that you are interested in? Because because while working as a domain expert, they will always have some kind of a curiosity um, and would like to understand more about a certain phenomenons, but they lack data analysis skills. So if you ask these kind of questions, they will most likely tell you a lot of things they were interested about. And the second source of reference would be data analysis. Um, these will be just looking into the data set that we currently have, and we need to come up with some grounds when selecting or choosing some kind of a hypothesis. So we should choose columns that are statistically significant and also choose interactions that are also statistically significant. But if we have domain experts or the third source, which is journals and articles, um, this data analysis will be the last resort. Anyways, coming back to our source of reference, the very third reference would be journals and articles. So if you look into online articles, there are a lot of articles that deal with data analysis and certain domains. So in our case, which is fraud detection, you can look into some of the journals that deals with detection, but using data analysis. Those journals usually provide columns that they used when doing data analysis. So by looking into multiple articles and choosing the columns or characteristics of fraud that commonly appear in multiple journals will most likely be important ones. So that those features will be the ones that we can start. And for our first hypothesis, we're going to focus on the second source, which is data analysis. We're going to hypothesize that we didn't do any interviews with domain experts and we didn't find any relevant information from journals and articles. So we are going to rely on solely on the data that we currently have at hand. Now, to start with um, choosing a starting point, we have to find features that are statistically significant in all major coverages. So we have three different coverages: liability, collision, and all perils. And what we need to do is we need to select columns that commonly appear statistically significant in all of these coverages. And the three columns that we have are fault, whether the accident, whose fault is it, and the vehicle price, and the address change claim. So these three are the main columns that we're going to look into, and I'll let you know the details when we go into coding. Now, the third tip is to make it digestible. If you see the graph on the back, you can see that there are 6 different categories. But if there are a lot of categories, the more categories there are, the more confusing it gets when we try to interpret the result. So it's better to group those categories into higher groups so that it's easy for us to interpret and also easy for the listeners or the domain experts to understand. So once they understand the overall concept, and then you can go deeper into the analysis. But first, it's very important to let the domain experts or the listeners to understand the overall concept. The you should able to start simple. So, and the very first and the easiest way to make something simple is that when it's a categorical variable, you can reduce the number of categories. Now, the fourth tip is to let the numbers tell the story. So when coming up with all these storylines in a hypothesis, you can borrow some insights from domain experts or borrow insights from articles, but it's always important to make decisions that are statistically significant. So every decision and every insight that we provide should be grounded based on statistical significance. So even using plots like this is very good, but at the end we need additional layer of testing whether these relationships that we want to explain in this graph is statistically significant. Now, the very last tip would be to provide one story at a time. So a human brain cannot process multiple information simultaneously. So providing complex storylines will rather make the overall um, hypothesis too complex. So we should be able to make it as simple as possible. And in order to make it simple, we should have one story, we should provide one story at a time. However, while making the overall storyline simple, we also need to be able to provide insights. And these insights comes from multiple layers of information. They have multiple grounds. You have to do a lot of work at the back end in order to come up with a insight. But the art of storytelling is that no matter how the overall method of coming up with this insight is hard or complex, the storyline that is provided to the listener should be simple and easy to understand. And now that we have these 5 tips in mind, let's go into Jupyter Notebook and see how we can construct a hypothesis and come up with insights.